I stood outside my son's in-laws mansion, my hand frozen on the brass door handle. Through the mahogany door, I could hear my daughter-in-law Jessica's voice carrying clearly in the crisp evening air. "Don't worry, Mom. Mark's father is, well, he's simple. Just be patient with him. He means well, but, different backgrounds and all that. My name is David Mitchell. I'm 56 years old and I make $40,000. Not a year, a month. But my son Mark has no idea. And tonight, I was about to find out exactly what kind of family he'd married into. Before I continue, don't forget to like this video and leave a comment below where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Thank you. Now, you might wonder why a man making nearly $500,000 a year would pretend to be poor. It started 7 years ago when Mark was still in college. I'd built my tech consulting firm from nothing, landing Fortune 500 clients and government contracts. But I learned early that money changes how people see you. My ex-wife's family taught me that lesson the hard way. The moment they smelled success, they came circling like vultures, hands out, sob stories ready, relationships suddenly important. I drove the same 2008 Honda Civic I'd had since before the success, lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house, wore clothes from Target. When Mark visited, I'd hide the Armani suits in storage, park the Tesla at my office. He saw a father who worked hard, lived simply, and taught him the value of every dollar. He never knew about the investment portfolio, the vacation homes I rented out, or the fact that I'd already set aside $2 million for his future, money he'd only get when he proved he could build something himself. 3 weeks ago, Mark called with nervous excitement. Jessica's parents, the Harringtons, had finally agreed to meet me. They lived in Westchester, old money apparently, and according to Mark, they were concerned about Jessica marrying beneath her social status. He actually used those words, not realizing how each one stung. My boy had been with Jessica for 3 years, married for 1, and I'd been strategically unavailable for every suggested meeting until now. "Dad, just try to make a good impression, okay?" Mark had said on the phone. "Maybe don't mention the Honda, and if they ask about your work, just say consulting. They don't need all the details about your little contracts." Little contracts. If only he knew that last month's little contract was implementing cybersecurity for a federal agency. But I just said what I always said. Don't worry about me, son. I'll be myself. And that's exactly what I planned to do. Or rather, I'd be the version of myself everyone expected to see. The morning of the dinner, I stood in my walk-in closet running my fingers along the 2 distinct sections. On the left, designer suits and Italian leather shoes. On the right, my Mark clothes, polo shirts from Walmart, khakis from Old Navy, and a pair of worn loafers I'd bought at Payless before they closed. I reached for a particularly unfortunate green polo that screamed, "I don't know how to dress for nice dinners," and paired it with khakis that were just a touch too short. Looking in the mirror, I almost laughed. The same face that had been on the cover of Tech Entrepreneur Monthly last year now looked like every working-class dad trying too hard at a country club perfect. The drive to Westchester gave me time to think about why I'd kept this charade going for so long. It wasn't just about my ex-wife's family, though that had been the catalyst. When Linda and I divorced 28 years ago, her relatives suddenly remembered I existed. Her cousin needed a loan for a sure-thing business. Her brother thought I should invest in his restaurant idea. He had no experience in food service, naturally. Her mother suggested I owed them for supporting me when I had nothing. The fact that they'd actually mocked my ambitions back then seemed forgotten. But with Mark, it became about something more. I wanted him to love me for me, not for what I could buy him. I wanted him to develop his own ambition, not coast on daddy's success. And honestly, it worked. Mark graduated with honors, landed his own job at a marketing firm, and never once asked me for money beyond the occasional dinner when times were tight. He was proud, independent, and hardworking. Everything I'd hoped for. My phone rang through the Honda's ancient speakers. Yes, I'd had Bluetooth installed. I'm not a masochist. It was Mark. "Dad, you're coming, right? You're not going to cancel last minute again?" "I'm on my way, son. GPS says 20 minutes. "Okay, good. Listen, when you get here, Jessica's parents are very particular. Use the side entrance, not the main door. Park on the street, not in the circular drive. And Dad, please don't order beer if they offer drinks. They're wine people." I bit my tongue to keep from mentioning the $3,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux sitting in my temperature-controlled wine cellar at home. Got it. Street parking, side door, no beer. And if her brother Thomas starts talking about investments, just nod and smile. He's between ventures right now. Between ventures. Rich people speak for unemployed. I'd met 100 Thomases in my career. Silver spoon kids who thought DNA was a business plan. And Dad, Jessica's mom, Victoria, she might seem a little cold. It's not personal. She's like that with everyone who's not from their circle. Their circle. Mark said it like he was already inside, but I could hear the insecurity in his voice. He was still auditioning, still trying to prove he belonged, and apparently, I was his biggest liability. The Harrington estate sprawled across 3 acres of manicured perfection, the kind of place where the grass looked like it had been cut with nail scissors, and every hedge was shaped into geometric precision. The main house, calling it a house felt like calling the Titanic a boat, rose 3 stories of red brick and white columns, very subtle. I parked my Honda on the street between a landscaping truck and what looked like a catering van. Walking up the long driveway, I counted no fewer than 6 security cameras. The side entrance Mark had mentioned turned out to be through a garden that probably cost more than most people's houses. Before I could ring the bell, the door opened. A man in an actual butler's uniform looked at me with polite confusion. "Delivery entrance is around back," he said, already starting to close the door. "I'm David, Mark's father, here for dinner." His face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, resignation, before settling on professional neutrality. "Of course. My apologies, Mr. Mitchell, was it? Please follow me." The foyer alone was bigger than my entire fake modest house. Real marble floors, a chandelier that belonged in a palace, and artwork that I recognized as authentic. One of the perks of my success was developing an eye for these things. The butler led me through hallways lined with family portraits, each face radiating the kind of inherited confidence that came from never worrying about mortgage payments. We emerged into what they probably called the casual dining room. Only 16 chairs instead of 30. Mark jumped up from his seat like he'd been electroshocked. "Dad, you made it!" He rushed over, and I could see him taking in my outfit with barely concealed horror. "Everyone, this is my father, David." Harold Harrington stood slowly, like he was doing me a favor. He was everything you'd expect. Silver hair, golf tan, handshake that tried too hard to establish dominance. "David, we've heard so much about you." The way he said it made clear that none of what he'd heard was good. Victoria Harrington didn't stand. She extended a hand like she expected me to kiss her ring. "Charmed, I'm sure. You must be exhausted from the drive traffic from— where is it you live again?" "Riverside," I said, naming my modest neighborhood. "How quaint." She said quaint the way other people might say contagious. Jessica at least tried to smile, though it looked painful. "So nice to finally meet you, Mr. Mitchell. Mark talks about you all the time." "Does he?" I looked at my son, who was suddenly fascinated by his water glass. Then there was Thomas, the brother. Late 20s, soft around the middle, wearing a Harvard Business School shirt just in case anyone forgot where he'd wasted his parents' money. He didn't stand, just gave me a little wave like I was the help. "Tommy's just back from Aspen," Victoria announced. "He's been networking with some fascinating venture capitalists." Translation: he'd been skiing on Daddy's dime and annoying successful people at the lodge bar. The seating arrangement told me everything I needed to know. Harold at the head, Victoria at the opposite end, Thomas and Jessica flanking their mother, Mark next to Jessica, and me. Well, they'd added a chair at the corner, not quite at the table, not quite excluded, the purgatory seat. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Harold asked. "We have an excellent Montrachet breathing." Before I could answer, Mark jumped in. "Dad usually just drinks beer." "Beer?" Victoria said it like she'd never heard the word before. "How refreshing. I don't think we have any. Perhaps the staff could check the garage?" "Water's fine," I said, enjoying the way they all relaxed slightly. Crisis averted. The poor person wouldn't be tainting their wine glasses. The first course arrived. Some kind of deconstructed salad that looked like a gardener had sneezed on a plate. Victoria explained it was from their personal chef who'd trained in Paris. I nodded appreciatively, while internally calculating that the 3 leaves of lettuce and decorative sauce squiggle cost more than most families' weekly grocery bills. "So, David," Harold began, cutting his single cherry tomato with surgical precision. "Mark tells us you're in consulting." "That's right. How interesting." His tone suggested it was anything but. Small clients, I assume? Local businesses? Various sizes, I said, keeping it vague. Thomas snorted. Must be tough in this economy. All the real money's in tech disruption now. I'm actually working on a revolutionary app that's going to change how people think about thinking. I almost choked on my water. How people think about thinking. It's complex. You probably wouldn't understand the technical aspects. The kid who'd failed freshman coding was going to explain technical aspects to me. This was better than cable. Thomas has such vision, Victoria beamed. He's been developing this concept for 3 years now. 3 years of developing a concept. I'd built and sold 2 companies in that time frame. Before diving deeper into this comedy show, I want to take a quick moment to say if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. It genuinely helps me continue sharing these stories with you, and your support means the world to me. Harold steered the conversation back to his favorite topic, himself. I was just telling Thomas he should speak to my connections at the club Real Players. Not like these wannabe entrepreneurs crowding the field now. No offense, David. None taken. I smiled at the man whose company, I happen to know, had been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. The problem with people today, Harold continued, warming to his theme, is they don't understand the value of pedigree. They think anyone can just start a business, make money, call themselves successful, but breeding matters. Background matters. Absolutely, Victoria agreed. It's why we were so surprised when Jessica brought Mark home. No offense, dear, she added to my son, who was shrinking in his chair. You've done admirably well considering your circumstances. His circumstances? I asked innocently. Well, you know. Victoria waved her hand vaguely. Growing up without advantages. It must have been so difficult for you, David, raising a child alone on such a modest income. Dad did great, Mark said quietly, but there was shame in his voice. Shame of me. Of course he did, Harold said condescendingly. And look, if you ever need financial advice, David, I'd be happy to help. I know a guy who's running this investment opportunity. Guaranteed returns, very exclusive. Usually there's a 50 or 50,000 minimum buy-in, but I could probably get you in for 10. That's very generous, I said, recognizing the MLM pitch immediately. We believe in helping family, Victoria added, even extended family. Oh, and I have several bags of Harold's old clothes in the garage. Perfectly good condition. You're about the same size. She looked at my polo shirt like it was radioactive. They might be a nice upgrade for special occasions. The main course arrived. Lamb so small I could have covered it with a business card. The Harringtons got 1 wine, I noticed. My glass was filled from a different bottle. The cheap stuff for the cheap guest. You know, David, Thomas said, already on his 3rd glass of the good wine, if you ever want to make real money, you should get into apps. It's all about disruption now. Although, he looked me up and down, you might be a bit old to understand the digital landscape. Thomas revolutionized social media at Harvard, Victoria said proudly. You mean he got suspended for creating that Rate Your Classmates app? Jessica muttered, earning a sharp look from her mother. That was a misunderstanding, Thomas said quickly. The administration didn't understand my vision. Speaking of vision, Harold interrupted, Mark, you really should consider coming to work for me. Real opportunity there. Get you out of that little marketing shop and into actual business. Mark loves his job, I said. Harold looked at me like I'd spoken out of turn. I'm sure he does. But loving something and building a future are different things, right, Mark? My son looked between us, torn. I mean, the opportunity sounds interesting. Of course it does, Victoria said. Harold could teach him so much about success, real success. As opposed to? I asked. Well, she laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. No offense, but there are levels to these things. There's getting by, and then there's actually thriving. I'm sure you've done your best with what you had to work with. The condescension was so thick you could spread it on toast. But what hurt wasn't their dismissal of me. It was Mark's silence. My son, who I'd raised to stand up for people, to have integrity, sat there letting them treat his father like a charity case. More wine? Harold asked the table, pointedly, not looking at me. This is from our personal collection. 20 years old. You can really taste the difference when you know quality. He poured for everyone except me, leaving my different bottle sitting conspicuously apart. Message received, you don't belong here, and we're not wasting the good stuff on you. Thomas's phone buzzed. Oh, that's my advisor. He's helping me pivot my concept to blockchain. That's where the real innovation is happening. Hey Mark, is your dad even online? Does he have email? They all looked at me expectantly, waiting for the caveman to admit he didn't understand their modern world. Email, I repeated slowly, savoring the moment. I manage. Before Thomas could respond with another condescending comment, my phone vibrated on the table. I usually kept it on silent during dinners, but tonight I'd made an exception. The caller ID showed Sarah Chen, my executive assistant. Perfect timing. Excuse me, I need to take this, I said, standing. Work emergency. At this hour? Victoria sniffed. How inconvenient. Though I suppose when you're hourly, you take what you can get. I stepped into the hallway, making sure to stay within earshot. Sarah, what's the situation? Sarah, who I'd briefed earlier, played her part perfectly. Her voice carried just enough to be overheard. Mr. Mitchell, I apologize for calling during your dinner, but Microsoft wants to move the contract signing to Monday. They're approving the full $7.3 million. Also, the Department of Defense finally cleared your security review for the Pentagon project. Tell Microsoft I can do Monday at 10, I said clearly, and send the DoD confirmation to my secure server. Yes, sir. Oh, and Forbes called again about that interview. Should I keep declining? For now, I prefer to stay under the radar. I hung up and walked back to find them all staring. Harold's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth. Everything all right? Mark asked, confused. Did you say Microsoft? Just a client issue, I said, sitting back down in my corner chair. Where were we? Ah, yes, Thomas was explaining the blockchain. Thomas blinked rapidly. Did you say 7 million? 0.3, I corrected. But let's hear more about your app. How people think about thinking sounds fascinating. The table fell silent. Harold set down his fork with a small clink. Victoria's perfect smile wavered slightly. I must have misheard, Harold said slowly. It sounded like you were discussing a rather large contract. Oh, it's not that large. Mid-size for us, really. I turned back to Thomas. So, blockchain integration? Are you building on Ethereum or creating your own protocol? Thomas's mouth opened and closed like a fish. We're still in the conceptual phase. For 3 years? I asked innocently. Interesting approach. Most blockchain startups aim for MVP within 6 months, but I'm sure you know that from Harvard Business School. How do you know about blockchain protocols? Jessica asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. I read, I said simply. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text, and I deliberately turned the preview on so it would show on the screen, face up on the table. The message from my CFO read, Q3 profits confirmed at $4.8 million. Champagne-worthy. Victoria leaned forward slightly, trying to read it without being obvious. I watched her face change as the numbers registered. Your phone seems very busy for a Saturday evening, she said, her tone different now, cautious. Occupational hazard when you work with international clients, different time zones. I picked up the phone and slipped it in my pocket, but not before a notification from my investment app flashed across the screen showing my portfolio value. I knew Victoria had seen it. Her face had gone pale. Harold cleared his throat. David, when you say consulting, what exactly does that entail? Oh, this and that. Cybersecurity infrastructure, mostly. Some AI integration. Digital transformation for organizations still running legacy systems. Boring stuff, really. Boring? Mark laughed nervously. Dad, you never mentioned AI or cybersecurity. I thought you helped small businesses with their computers. That too, I said. Every client matters, whether it's a local bakery or a Fortune 500 company. Fortune 500? Thomas squeaked. I pulled out my wallet to grab a tissue, deliberately slowly, and my American Express black card slipped out onto the table with a distinctive metallic clink. Every eye locked onto it. The Centurion card, the one you can't apply for. The one they invite you to get when you spend over $250,000 a year. Oops, I said, picking it up casually. Harold's face had gone through several colors and settled on a fascinating shade of purple. Is that? I looked at the card, as if seeing it for the first time. Oh, this. Yeah, they keep sending me metal cards. Such a pain at airport security. Victoria's hand shook slightly as she reached for her wine. The good wine, I noticed, not the bottle they designated for me. Dad, Mark said slowly, his voice strange. Where did you get that card? Get it? Oh, you don't get these, son. They come to you. I tucked it away. But enough about me. Harold, you were mentioning something about an investment opportunity. What kind of returns are we talking about? Harold's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. It's very exclusive. Perhaps we should discuss it privately. No need to be exclusive with family, I said, smiling. Although I should mention, I typically don't look at anything under a few million. Due diligence is the same, whether it's 50,000 or 5 million, so it's more efficient to focus on larger opportunities. Thomas, apparently unable to stand the confusion, pulled out his phone. David Mitchell, cybersecurity consultant, he muttered as he typed. His eyes widened. Holy, Dad, look at this. He showed Harold his phone. I knew what he'd found. The TechCrunch article from last year about my company's expansion, complete with a photo of me ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. That's you, Harold said, looking between the phone and me like reality had broken. Oh, that. I waved dismissively. They made such a fuss about the IPO. Bit embarrassing, really, all those photographers. IPO? Mark stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Dad, what IPO? Jessica grabbed Thomas's phone, her face cycling through expressions as she scrolled. It says here your company is valued at... This can't be right. Valuations are always inflated, I said modestly. The real number's probably 30% lower. 30% lower than 300 million? Thomas shouted. Is that what they're saying now? I shook my head. Tech journalists, always exaggerating. Victoria had gone completely silent, her perfect composure cracking like ice in warm water. She kept looking at me, then at her husband, then back at me, as if hoping one of us would reveal this was all an elaborate prank. Mark sank back into his chair. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That I do okay? You never asked about specifics, son. You always seemed embarrassed by my little contracts, so I didn't bore you with details. Bore me with... Mark's voice cracked. Dad, you're literally richer than the Harringtons. Now let's not make comparisons, I said gently, though I noticed Harold flinch at Mark's words. Jessica's phone chimed. She looked at it, then gasped. Mom, look at this. She showed Victoria something on her screen. It's the Forbes Tech 50 list. He's number 37. That was a weird year, I said. They ranked everyone oddly. Thomas was still Googling furiously. You own 17 patents? You spoke at the World Economic Forum? You had dinner with Elon Musk? Elon talks a lot at dinner. Barely let anyone else get a word in. Harold stood abruptly, his chair legs scraping. David, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh? I tilted my head. About what? We thought... Victoria started, then stopped. For the first time all evening, she seemed at a loss for words. You thought I was poor, I said simply, and you treated me accordingly. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold's face reddened. Now, see here, we were perfectly cordial. You tried to seat me in the corner. You served me different wine. Your wife offered me your old clothes. You suggested my son should be grateful you even let him marry your daughter, despite his circumstances. And Thomas here wondered if I had email. Each point landed like a slap. Thomas shrank in his chair. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand went to her throat. But the Honda... Jessica said weakly. The clothes. I like my Honda. It's reliable. And clothes? I looked down at my polo. They're just fabric. They don't define me any more than your designer dress defines you. Although, I added, unable to resist, yours probably cost more than most people's rent. Mr. Mitchell, Harold said, his tone suddenly very different. Nervous. Almost pleading. I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over? I'd love to hear more about your business. In fact, I have some ventures that could use an investor of your caliber. There it was, the pivot, the sudden warmth. Dollar signs had appeared in Harold's eyes like a cartoon character. That investment opportunity you mentioned, I said, the exclusive one with guaranteed returns. That sounds an awful lot like an MLM scheme. Are you trying to recruit me into a pyramid scheme, Harold? Harold's face went from red to white. It's not. It's a legitimate multi-level marketing opportunity. So a pyramid scheme with extra steps? I turned to Thomas. And you've been developing an app for 3 years without writing a single line of code, haven't you? Thomas mumbled something incoherent. Here's what I find interesting, I continued, my voice calm but firm. You have this beautiful house, these expensive things, this air of superiority. But Harold, your company filed for Chapter 11 restructuring 8 months ago. You're drowning in debt, aren't you? The room went dead silent. Harold's face drained of all color, and Victoria's hand tightened on her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "How did you?" Harold started. "It's public record," I said simply. "Anyone can look up bankruptcy filings. Your house is mortgaged 3 times over. The cars are leased. Even this dinner was probably put on credit cards you can't pay off. But you sit here, in your house of cards, judging others for not meeting your standards." "Dad," Mark said quietly, "stop, please." I looked at my son. "Stop? Like you stopped them from insulting me? From treating me like I was beneath them?" Mark's face crumpled. I didn't. "You didn't defend me once, son. Not once. You were so eager to fit in with them that you let them treat your father like garbage. And for what? To impress people who were living a lie?" Jessica stood up, tears in her eyes. "This is cruel. You're being cruel." "Cruel?" I asked. "Was it cruel when your mother offered me charity clothes? When your father tried to scam me? When your brother mocked me for possibly not having email? Or was it only cruel when the poor person turned out to be richer than you?" "We didn't know," Victoria whispered. "Exactly," I said. "You didn't know. And that's the point. You showed me exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing to offer you. You showed me your values, your character, your hearts, and they're all empty." I stood up, pulling on my jacket. "You know what real wealth is? It's raising a son who worked for everything he has, who never took a penny he didn't earn, who I thought had integrity and kindness. But tonight, I saw him choose your approval over his father's dignity." "Dad, wait." Mark stood too. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Your wife's family is bankrupt, Mark. Not just financially, but morally. They judge people by their bank accounts, not their character. They offered me scraps from their table while their own table is about to be repossessed. Is this really the family you want to align yourself with? Harold found his voice, and it was angry now. "You came here to humiliate us. This whole thing was a setup." "No," I said. "I came here to meet my son's new family, to see who he'd chosen. You humiliated yourselves. I just didn't stop you." Thomas, surprisingly, laughed. A bitter, self-aware sound. "He's right, Dad. We're pathetic. We're broke, pretending to be rich, judging someone for being poor when he could buy and sell us 10 times over." "Thomas," Victoria snapped. "What, Mom? It's true. We've been living this charade for years. At least he's honest about who he is." I moved toward the door, then turned back. "Harold, that exclusive investment opportunity, it's a scam. You're probably already in debt to them. Get out now, before you lose what little you have left." "How dare you?" Harold started. "Also, Thomas, your app idea about thinking, someone launched that 2 years ago. It failed in 6 months. But if you actually want to learn coding instead of just talking about it, I know people who run boot camps, real education, not Harvard legacy admissions." I looked at Jessica. "You seem smart. You must see through all this. Do you really want Mark to become like your father, drowning in debt while maintaining appearances? Or like your brother, talking about success without ever working for it?" Finally, I turned to my son. "Mark, I love you. I've always loved you. But tonight, you showed me that my money isn't the only thing I've been hiding. You've been hiding too, hiding your real self to fit into their world. The question is there approval worth losing who you are?" Mark's face was streaked with tears. "Dad, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice when you told me to use the side door, when you coached me on how to behave, when you sat silently while they insulted me. You were ashamed of me when you thought I was poor. Are you proud of me now that you know I'm rich? Because either way, it's about the money, isn't it?" I walked to the door, then stopped one more time. "Oh, Victoria, that wine you served me, the cheap one, it's actually worth more than the one you served everyone else. It's a 2015 Domaine de la Romanée Conti, about $3,000 a bottle. But you didn't know that, because you buy wine based on price tags, not knowledge, just like everything else in your life." The last thing I heard as I left was the sound of Victoria's wine glass finally shattering on the floor. I sat in my Honda in the driveway, not starting it yet, just breathing. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep sadness. I'd lost my son tonight, not to marriage, but to materialism. The passenger door suddenly opened, and Mark climbed in. His eyes were red, his face blotchy. "Dad, please, can we talk?" I stared straight ahead. "Now, you want to talk? Not in there in front of them, but here in private?" I know I messed up. I know I failed you, but Dad, I need to understand why. Why hide all of this from me? I finally looked at him. My boy, the same kid who used to help me fix computers in the garage when he was 8, who thought his dad was a hero for solving printer problems. Your mother left when you were 2, I said quietly. Left us both for a richer man. Said I'd never amount to anything. That she didn't want to raise a child in poverty. Mark's breath hitched. I'd never told him the real reason Linda left. I promised myself that night, holding you while you cried for Mommy, that I'd prove her wrong. But more importantly, I promised I'd raise you to value people. Not price tags, to see worth in character, not cash. So when the money came, I kept it separate. I wanted you to love me as your dad, not as a wallet. I do love you, Dad. Do you? Or do you love the idea of having a rich father now? Would you have let them treat me that way if you'd known the truth? Mark was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I wouldn't have. And that's the problem, isn't it? I should have defended you regardless. Yes, I said simply. You should have. We sat in silence for a minute. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the Harringtons' house, lights blazing in every window. They were probably in crisis mode, Googling my net worth, calculating how badly they'd screwed up. What happens now? Mark asked. That's up to you. You can go back in there, apologize to them, pretend this never happened, keep playing their game, accumulating debt to maintain appearances, raising kids who think they're better than others because of their zip code. Or you can choose to be the man I raised you to be, the one who earned his degree, who works hard at his job, who fell in love with Jessica presumably for who she is, not what she has. Mark laughed bitterly. What she has? Dad, they're broke. I know, I've known for months. Did my research before coming here, but they're not just financially broke, son. They're spiritually broke, morally broke. And they're trying to make you the same way. Jessica's not like them, Mark said defensively. Isn't she? She sat there while they insulted me, too. She made excuses for me to them before I arrived. She's been trained to see the world through their lens. The question is whether she can unlearn it. The front door of the house opened. Jessica stood there, backlit, looking lost. She started walking toward the car. Speaking of which, I said. Jessica approached Mark's window. Her makeup was ruined, her perfect hair disheveled. Can I talk to you both? Mark looked at me. I nodded. She came around and got in the back seat. Mr. Mitchell, I'm ashamed. Deeply, deeply ashamed. Not just of tonight, but of everything. Of who I've become. Who my family made me. It's not about shame, I said. It's about choice. What are you going to choose now? I don't want to be like them, she said quietly. I watched them turn from dismissive to desperate the moment they learned about your money. It was disgusting. They were disgusting. I was disgusting. You're young, I said. Softer now. Young people make mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them. Your father, Jessica said to Mark, just exposed everything I've been trying to ignore about my family for years. They're frauds. We're frauds. The whole thing is a house of cards. So what do we do? Mark asked. I turned to face them both. You start over. You stop trying to impress people who aren't worth impressing. You live within your means. You value honestly earned money over inherited debt. You judge people by their actions, not their assets. Will you forgive me? Mark asked. Can you? Forgiveness isn't the issue, son. The issue is whether you've learned, whether you understand that the man you were ashamed of in that house is the same man who built a company from nothing, who raised you alone, who chose to drive an old Honda because cars don't define us. I understand, Mark said. I think I finally understand. Me too, Jessica added. My parents are probably in there right now trying to figure out how to get your money. My dad's already planning his pitch. My mom's probably rehearsing her apology. Thomas is definitely updating his LinkedIn to say we're related. Despite everything, I laughed. Probably. I don't want their life, Jessica said firmly. I don't want to end up like them, drowning in debt and self-importance. Then don't, I said simply. It really is that simple. Choose differently. Mark reached over and took my hand. Dad, that money you've been hiding, I don't want it. Not now, not as inheritance. I want to earn my own way, like you did. I squeezed his hand. That's my boy. That's the son I raised. But maybe, Mark added with a small smile, you could teach me? Not give me money, but teach me how to build something real? And me, Jessica added quickly. I have a business degree I've never used. because my parents said working was beneath me. But I want to work. I want to build something. I looked at these two kids, Pinalquides, because that's what they were really, just kids trying to figure out the world, and felt hope for the first time all evening. Okay, I said, but we do it my way. You start at the bottom, you learn every aspect. You fail and try again. No shortcuts, no handouts, no nepotism. Deal, they said in unison. And one more thing, I added. We're going to Sunday dinner at my real house tomorrow, the one you've never seen, Mark. Bring your appetite and your work clothes. We're going to cook together, like we used to when you were young. No servants, no pretense, just family. I'd love that, Jessica said, and seemed to mean it. As I started the Honda, Mark asked, Dad, why do you really keep this car? I smiled. Because it reminds me of where I came from. And more importantly, it reminds me that happiness isn't about what you drive. It's about where you're going and who's along for the ride. We drove away from the Harrington estate, leaving their world of false appearances behind. In the rearview mirror, I could see Harold standing in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear, probably trying to research how to contact me for investment. He'd never find my real contact information. That was for people who saw David Mitchell, not dollar signs. Dad, Mark said as we reached the main road, I love you, the real you, Honda and all. I know, son, I know. 6 months later, Mark and Jessica started their own company, a legitimate one, built on hard work and real innovation. They're still building it, still struggling sometimes, still learning. They drive used cars and live in a small apartment, and they're happier than they ever were, pretending to be something they weren't. The Harringtons? Harold's company finally went under. They lost the house. Last I heard, Thomas was actually working, really working, at a startup, starting over at 30. Sometimes hitting bottom is the only way to learn which way is up. As for me, I still drive the Honda, still wear my polo shirts, still live simply. Because I learned long ago that money doesn't define you, it reveals you. And what it revealed about the Harringtons that night was everything I needed to know. But more importantly, what it revealed about my son was that underneath the temporary confusion, the real Mark, the one I raised, was still in there. He just needed a reminder that worth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in sense, common sense. And that's the kind of wealth that actually matters.